Are we on? Okay, that's a good start. Hi, my name is Kristen Olsen. I'm a team coordinator, peer specialist at Flourish Australia in Newcastle. I oversee the day programs kind of there that run out of our centre, so like art and music and kind of the fun side of mental health.
Yep, my name is B, pronouns are they, them. I am a peer support worker for Headspace Penrith, so I work in youth mental health for 12 to 25-year-olds. I work in the primary care and the community development side of things for peer work, so a lot of engagement with schools. Not a lot of one-on-ones at the moment, but I'll get into that later. Thank you.
G'day everyone, I'm Jarrad Hickmott, Consumer Partnerships Coordinator for CESLID Mental Health Service. That gives me portfolio area of peer workforce, consumer representation and yes, survey. Thank you.
And for those that don't know what CESLID is, it's South Eastern Sydney, LHD. I'm Tamara, I'm from Northern Sydney Local Health District. I'm consumer peer worker for the Older Persons Mental Health Service.
Thank you very much. We have the Hoover open, questions coming through, so don't miss out on your chance to ask a question or two. In the meantime, let me start with something easy. So what have you found the most surprising thing in taking on a peer worker role? And I'm going to ask you all this one. So do we want to start at the end?
We can start at the end. But
Kristen.
Before I answer that question, can I just quickly preface everything I'm going to say today with something? Okay, here it comes. Basically, I'm just kind of like exhausted, just in general. Probably everyone in this room has been at some point as well. But I was trying to think of like ways to answer the questions that we were given, and I just like was kind of blanking. So I kind of put 3 people in my mind that are not here today. That I'm like, what would they say? And they're all not here for various reasons. One of them was here yesterday and she left. You could probably guess Faye Jackson. I was like, that's kind of how I approach things, is what would Faye say? The second person is somebody I support, and they didn't know if they had an invite to this. They access our services, they're NDIS participant. I kind of spoke to them about what they would like me to share, so keep that in mind. And the third person was meant to be here today. He's not dead, but he's just not here today, but he was registered and is not traveling super hot, but he really wanted to be here. So I promised him I would just speak on his behalf, and he said he trusted me for that. So yeah, those are my answers. So maybe not a whole lot of my opinion in that. Can you repeat the question?
So the question is, what have you found the most surprising in taking on a peer worker role?
The boundaries of how quickly you approach like interpersonal boundaries, but once you get right up to them, it's very easy to like cross over them. Something that we'd spoken about in our like peer supervision training was that peer support is not therapy, but it can be therapeutic, but it enters a really different territory as soon as it becomes therapy. So I thought that would be a bit more easy and like rigid, but it's been a bit more fluid than I thought.
Good answer. Thank you. B.
I hope I don't upset anyone with this, but how long peer work has been around for? I have mistakenly told people that peer work has only come through in the last 3 to 5 years.
Love that. It's a good job.
And I am as old as peer work is. So it's 25th, and then I kind of sat there and went, damn, I just like dismissed a whole bunch of people. I think that's mainly because it's really not well known, or at least if it's known that, actually no, back to that, it's not well known. The service availability isn't recognised very much. So what's most surprising is definitely how long peer work has been around and how little people know about it.
Doesn't it tie in beautifully with our questions yesterday around the history and why that's important? Carry on. Good observation. Jarrad, you're up.
That's a nice history segue. I think for me, back in a previous life, I did a double major in ancient history and archaeology. Very cool, not useful. Then I sort of like, okay, well, I've liked mental health, I'll get involved there. And so I show up for my interview, it's peer work. Honestly, I Googled it the night before, no idea what I'm going into. Got the job, they're like, okay, you're going to be working in a MICU. Great, what's a MICU? A mental health intensive care unit, so that's kind of the pointy end of the pointy end. And so I think it's similar to what you were saying in terms of the information out there. I certainly sort of fell into it. And once I sort of fell into it, I went and spoke to the num there, and I was like, mate, full disclosure, I've got no idea what I'm doing, eh? And I was like, any pointers? And he's like, oh yeah, just make it your own, you'll be right. Which wasn't exactly helpful at the time, but I certainly did make it my own by the end. I think I was somewhat shocked, based on my previous experience, how many, let's sort of say, barriers were there, both sort of created by people external to the peer workforce, but also created from people internal to the workforce in terms of, I've always done things this way, so we can't do that, or we can't do this, or you're technically non-clinical, so you can't do this training. I hadn't experienced that before, and that was sort of my first foray, so I found that a little bit surprising and quite a bit frustrating to be honest.
Tamara.
I think it sounds like I've had some similar experiences where I just was thrown in the deep end and knew nothing about peer work, and I started in teams that also didn't know what peer work was. So the lack of, I guess, support and education that you experience when you're coming into the peer workforce, because we do work quite siloed, even though I have a great team at Northern Sydney, I don't get to actually connect with them quite frequently. But the other aspect of it that I was thinking about as surprising but also really beautiful is the fluidity of the role. So I came from a background where I had a to-do list every single day of things that had to be done by certain points in time, and I came into this role and had no structure, and was able to make it what I wanted to. So surprising when you come from that background of like high pace, need KPIs, deadlines, to having that space where I can make my role what I want and what the consumers need in that space, rather than somebody telling me exactly how to do it and what to do. But still, that lack of support doesn't help you to know what areas you can actually go into in that space either.
Fabulous. I'm going to do that kind of creative thing that we do where I'm going to give a repertoire of questions and you're going to think about which one you're the most keen to answer. Don't worry if you're duplicating somebody else. And the questions were, how would you like to see the peer work evolve? So this is kind of like thinking into the future. Second one is, how could we better support new peer workers entering mental health? And the other one is, we've already answered that one, is do you feel that the training you've received has been sufficient to prepare you? So if you're sort of thinking about those three. And just give me a little nod if you've got your one, oh, look, right, there you go. Okay, go.
Yeah. The first one, I, to be honest, tuned out the rest of them, so because I was already thinking about my answer, to be completely honest. So can you say the specific wording again?
So the question is, how would you like to see peer work evolve?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is I would like to see the language change, but I think that's something that just naturally evolves anyway, because, as new things are happening and technology is changing and we have different resources, like language just will change as we're kind of trying to adapt really complex ideas for like big groups of people. So that's something that I'm not really worried about that happening. It's more of like how language is used. I can't stop thinking about what Faye said yesterday about kind of that overlap of clinical and kind of peer, and how the specific term she used was like the clinical creep, and how quickly that kind of starts to happen in really small ways. So I started just like writing down a few ways I noticed it happening, of how quickly the us versus them language kind of happens, and even words like recovery. I'm not sitting well with it right now, but sometimes I am, because sometimes there are things I want to recover from. But for example, like or elements of my lived experience of mental health distress are very tethered to being neurodivergent as well. So it's like I can't separate the two, but I'm like, I don't want to recover from being myself. Like I don't need to recover from something I just am. So I think the way yeah, and the best way I know how to put it is the person that accesses our services, he told me a few weeks ago that the word recovery is no longer in vogue. And I'm like, well said. Like, thank you. I love that. So I've kind of thought of a term that I personally like. And again, it's hard. I can't apply this to everyone because I don't know what people like to refer to their chaos as, but I like to say I'm embracing chaos, and I have a tattoo, and my friend that was supposed to be here today has the same tattoo, so.
Thank you.
So
Which question are you answering, first of all?
I kind of want to morph the last two. So
Okay,
it's
yeah.
about the training
Yep,
and
yep.
what to expect
So-
when you first join.
Yes, that's right.
Right. So I mentioned previously that I'm currently doing one-on-ones, but not doing one-on-ones. And so I work for Headspace. And there are other peer workers here who are on a similar, actually working in the same centre but on different teams. And so I am currently working in two different things, and they have told me that I won't be doing one-on-ones for 12 months because they want us to be really, really skilled. And the early psychosis team got put into one-on-ones within their first week. So I think the main, yeah, I heard someone gasp, exactly, it's not right. But also to kind of question whereabouts is that gap between when someone comes in to when they're ready to doing one-on-ones. So the prompts that we were given for this thing kind of spoke about skills, and I wanted to spice it up a bit by saying we have already embedded into us as peer workers the desire to apply meaning to our lived experience, to better the lives of other people through that meaning. We have that need for self-reflection to go, okay, how can I be better and how can I do my work better? And then peer supervision kind of does that all again. So when someone asks what skill a peer worker needs when coming into a new space, it's not a skill. You need another peer worker. You need two of them. You need to be able to bounce your thoughts off of someone else who is also leading and learning the landscape with you as it is evolving, because peer work isn't the same as it was. I'm saying this, well, I said that it wasn't a thing a couple of years ago. But I'm guessing that peer work isn't the same thing that it was a couple of years ago. And I'm guessing as well that it's not going to be the same that it is now coming forward. You know, I think that, at least in where I'm working, we are more described as the vibe checkers and the vibe bringers as peer workers, because we have the ability to sit there and go, no, the way that you are approaching this young person is not really the way that you should be doing it, you know?
And embrace that chaos.
Yeah, embracing that chaos, but also to take it back clinically and be like, hey, do you want to realistically get this young person to really connect with you, or are you just trying to do the clinical thing? I'm sure everyone's like, yes, the clinical thing. Anyway. But yeah, I think that a skill that we all need is the ability to bounce our thoughts off of someone else. And so that skill is brought in with another peer worker. So, yes.
Thank you, B, and Kristen for all the support on the side there.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add something to that, because I had a conversation with someone and she literally just left, but I was like, no, stay for the panel. And she's like, no, I don't want to. But I had an hour-long conversation with her anyway, and almost kept her here. But we were talking about how I know this is not always true, but clinical approaches can often come off as how to settle down your behaviors for the comfort and safety of other people, rather than what's happening internally that's making these behaviors happen. Like being able to bounce someone off that safely, that's spot on.
Meeting them at their level rather
Yeah.
than the level that clinicians are proposing that we have to be meeting them at. Like, we're built more in realism and connection, whereas the clinical way is holistic perspectives, not that quite connection, if that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, tool used in the wrong area can damage people.
Thank you, Jarrad. You're up next. Which one did you choose?
Future of peer work.
Yeah, go.
I'll sort of start with a little preface. I can be a little bit left field, so do forgive me. I think sort of big picture, future of peer work is this identity as a discipline akin to the other disciplines that we have. And I know some people from my LSD would be very familiar with me asking, sort of, what are you bringing to the table? And this use of the word "and", because naturally it's like, okay, peer work, what is that? Okay, lived experience. But asking that "and" question as well, because there are a lot of skills that go alongside of that. It might be like, okay, well, I have experience doing groups, or I have experience doing this, or I've got an ancient history archaeology degree that I can use, or this, that, and that. I think for me, the future of peer work, I want to move beyond just this idea of lived experience, because I don't think lived experience in and of itself is unique. I think this morning there was a comment around, I think most people in here has a lived experience of mental health. What I would argue is that that is a universal thing. We all have physical health, we all have mental health. What that looks for people and how up and down or how sort of stagnant that is very different. But the things that make peer work unique is the skills and utilisation of that lived experience for the benefit of others. I think I sort of talked before around this idea of sort of the barriers that come up, and one of those barriers is, well, you're non-clinical or you're not a clinician. But actually trying to drill down into what that actually means, and I can't remember which dictionary it was, but one of the dictionaries sort of says a clinician is someone that has skills and expertise in a certain area that uses those to help others, in which case, is that not peer work as well? And when I sort of put that to clinicians, they're like, oh, no, but it's different, but it's the same. I get a varied response, but I think even at least just asking that question, and again, I think asking that question for us as a workforce as well, and realising that, yes, there is skills and trainings that come along with this. I think, I don't want to throw any disciplines under the bus, but we do a lot of skill, a lot of development, a lot of training, a lot of utilisation of those skills. We're much more than just lived experience, and I think alongside that comes this sort of separation somewhat from the sort of consumer rep space and this sort of quasi-consumer reps. I'm sure there's many of peer workers in here that have been used as sort of the consumer reps for panels or groups or whatever it may be. But again, that professional identity akin to the other professions is probably where I want to see the future.
Fantastic, thank you. Tamara, after all that, do you need reminding again what the questions are?
Yes, please. Just the middle one. So it's
I'll
the
give you
future
the-
of peer work. The last one was training.
How would you like to see peer work evolve? How could we better support new peer workers? Which aspects of peer workers surprise you? You've already done that one. Do you feel that the training you've received is sufficient?
Can I kind of morph all of them together? So to start with, I received 0 training when I started. I am doing other studies, so I haven't done my Cert 4. So all of my training was on the job. In my space, I reached out to other peer workers to set up buddy shifts. I did online research and just did a lot of online heady education to familiarise myself with what it was. So I think knowing that that's not just only been my experience, but a lot of other peer workers within the health districts, a way that we can improve that while also providing support to peer workers and looking towards the future is having a standardised kind of orientation process. So I think it was either earlier today, a lot of conversations from the last 2 days feed into a lot of these questions. Somebody talked about going to visit other LHDs and spending time in other spaces that are familiar to the roles that you're studying with, and that's a really great way to get that education and training and support and those networks that help us feel supported and have somewhere to reach out when we need that extra support or need a bit of, hey, I've got this idea, have you tried it in your area? Even within the LHD updates, there's a lot of things that are happening across the different LHDs that are very similar, but every LHD is starting from scratch with that rather than going, hey, I saw that you've done this, can we kind of buddy up and see how we can do it in our LHD as well? So there's all of that connection. And I think the future of peer work is bringing all of these spaces together, not just the LHDs, but the CMOs as well. I know within my LHD, we're doing a lot of work at looking at workforce development plans because there's no career progression for us within our LHD. There are in others, and I know it's a work in progress, but just having that support and the funding that comes with that, because that's obviously the biggest dilemma is we want these things, but we don't have the funding to produce them. And that support from higher levels. So we want to see in our LHD peer workers in leadership positions, in executive roles where all of those big decisions are made that funnel down to be like, hey, we've got this funding, we've decided you need to do this, and because you're a peer worker, we expect you to do it. So we want a peer worker or a person with lived experience at those levels where those conversations start so that it's an actual guided co-production, co-design process that's done properly.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tamara. Our question that's coming through with the most votes, and there's lots of comments on here, so you might want to take the time to read them later. Some pretty interesting ones. But it's just as peer workers move more into clinical settings, how do we ensure peers remain true to their values and principles? And I think it's a really good question. So you sort of nod, think about it, and if you've got a yes, okay, go.
Yeah.
Kristen.
Well, we had the conversation today that Chris was facilitating about like the CMOs and everything, and we were kind of talking about that a little bit, about kind of the time pressure of whenever I do get a few minutes with someone who is in more of a clinical setting. I have about 2 minutes, so I have to summarize everything really quickly, and so I just sound like I'm just running my mouth about nothing in particular because I haven't got to the point yet. But I'm also not invited to many clinical spaces, so I haven't really seen what language they want me to use. So I'm right now kind of just trying out some ways to summarize things, but then I'm skipping steps. And I think the answer to kind of that, and just in response to what you said as well, is the importance of being invited into rooms that I don't have keys to. I don't need to access day to day, but to be more invited into clinical settings to get my peer perspective, for example. Even this morning, I was talking to Lisa, she's sitting over there, and one of the managers was reviewing, I think it was just the escalation policy, and she's like, hey, Lisa, you're a peer, can I get your opinion? What do you think about this and this and this? And straight away, Lisa's like, probably don't put call the police as one of the top ones. And she was like, yep, cool, done. I'm like, it's actually that easy when we're asked. We know what to contribute that can be helpful. Because if you've ever had a police rock up at your house when you are in distress, it's terrifying. We just need to be asked.
Good answer.
I think
Did you want to add?
I think the question was also about that blur of the line. Is that
Yeah.
right? Where the clinical becomes part of the peer workspace.
Right.
I only work in clinical settings, so I attend clinical meetings every day, sometimes several times a day, and it can be difficult, but I think that's where, and I think Chris was talking about this morning, accountability comes in, and that opportunity for actual co-reflection, peer-led kind of supervision space where you are accountable to other peers and having people kind of self-reflect and check what language you're using, because it really comes down to the language we use. It's not necessarily the way we're working with people, but it's the specific words that can slowly creep in. And that's probably what's most important, is the language that we use when working with people and speaking about people. I know in one of our teams we have clinicians that are afraid to have a peer worker because then they have to change the way they speak about consumers. And my reaction to that is, well, if you already think that, then you shouldn't be talking about them that way to start with. So that's what we need to do as peer workers as well. Is that how we would like somebody to talk about us? If not, then we need to check our own language. And are we actually working from a peer values space?
Thank you, Tamara. Okay, if we are... I'm not chopping, no, okay, we're good. Let's put our hands together for these presenters. And if you were a presenter, can you stand up? A panellist, a keynote, standing up if you were...